if you're still moving, you ain't going to be dead.
But Ozzy, let me start with you. How are you? You've been through all this health hell.
I finally had my last procedure 2 days ago. I can't believe I've come to the end of it. I'm still back up. The main thing is over now. I'm done with the surgery, but it's been 5 years of absolute hell for me and the family. My family have been so supportive to me, you know. I couldn't have done it without them. It's been really a bad scene. I have Parkinson's, but I never think about it.
Just a few weeks before Ozzy Osbourne, famously known as the Prince of Darkness, passed away, his family had one last heartfelt conversation with him on live television. That moment became unforgettable, not only because it showed Ozzy in his final public appearance, but also because it revealed signs of the tragedy that was soon to come. On Piers Morgan Uncensored, Ozzy and his family opened up about the years of struggle he had endured, his health battles, and the impact it had on those closest to him. For the first time, the public heard about the pain behind the scenes and the way Ozzy managed to keep his spirit alive despite everything. In what would be his last public interview,
yeah, and I think that's the biggest misconception. It's like so many people think, you know, what's happened with Dad over the last 5 years is a result of like Parkinson's, but it was the neck injury and the fall that he took in 2019. So
right, well actually, I was going to talk about this because in fact it goes back even further, doesn't it? We'll come to the Parkinson's in a moment, Ozzy, but if you go back, it actually goes back to when you had that horrendous quad bike crash in 2003.
Quad bike? Yeah, well, I just got up and carried on, but I had a broken something in my neck.
Yeah.
And I carried on working with it until I had that fall, and then everything came undone, you know.
Going back to that ATV crash at your estate in England, take me through what you remember from that day.
Okay, I was in Los Angeles, and I was working there, and I get the phone call that Ozzy is in an ambulance on the way to the hospital.
What I remember, we were filming a show for the Osbourne's reality thing. I went onto my line, I got on my quad bike. I'd gone down an embankment, which I've done every day, and the bike went up in the air, landed on me. The next minute I know, I was in hospital.
But what happened was, because the crew that were filming the Osbournes got some of it, he bounced up. The security guard went to him and got him up and put him on the back of the bike, of another bike that the security guard was on, and drove him round to the front of the house. The emergency services had sent a helicopter for Ozzy, because we live in the countryside and, you know, we've got like a small forest in our land. And they were sending a helicopter, but the security guards put him in the car and drove him to the hospital, and there was a helicopter on the way. And they told us that the worst thing you can ever do is move somebody after an accident like that. But Ozzy doesn't remember any of it because he was in shock, and they weren't sure of his injuries. And then the doctor called me and then said about his arm. The main artery to his arm had been severed, and there was no blood flow, no oxygen in his arm, and they're trying to save his arm. And then as soon as I heard that, I was just gone. You know, I am just like, no, I just can't. And I got on a plane literally 2 hours later, flew to London. Everybody in England was just, you know, so devastated. The police met me at the airport. They got me to the hospital within, you know, 30 minutes, and, you know, everybody was rallying around Ozzy, and they'd put Ozzy in an induced coma for 8 days so that he would be out of pain. And when literally the first time I saw Ozzy, he was in a ward full of people that were in comas, and, you know, tubes and bottles coming out of everywhere, and, you know, one side of him there was a bottle of blood where he was dripping, the other side it's full of pee, and I'm just like, this is, you know, a nightmare. I'm going to wake up in a minute.
He was able to express his thoughts and feelings before his body finally gave in. Sharon Osbourne, his wife and life partner, had her world turned upside down when Ozzy's health began to fail. She went from traveling across the globe, managing world tour, and enjoying vibrant nights on stage with him, to living a quiet, secluded life devoted entirely to caring for her husband. My life completely changed. Sharon admitted, I was always someone in the spotlight, but suddenly I became a full-time wife and mother, managing everything at home. I never complained though, because I love Ozzy, and we've always stood by each other. Her words captured the sacrifice she made not just as a wife, but as a woman who had to give up the life she knew to make sure Ozzy was cared for. This wasn't only a fight against sickness.
On Ozzy's health, it's great to see the great man looking so well, actually. But I know it's been a huge thing for you as a family that Ozzy's been through this horrible stuff with his back, the Parkinson's obviously as well, and as a result, he's not been able to do what he loves most, and that's touring and being a massive rock star. What's it been like for you, Sharon, as the matriarch of the family, to be through the last few years with Ozzy like this?
It's been, I mean, so many people can relate, who has a partner, whether it's the wife or the husband that's not well. It changes your whole life. You suddenly you're off in another direction and your life changes so drastically. It's really hard, especially in the summers, because every summer Ozzy works and goes out and do festivals, and we're traveling all over the world, and for the last 5 years our life has changed dramatically. But on the other hand, it's great that I've had Ozzy at home for 5 years. He's driving me crazy, but we've been together every day for 5 years. Yes, Piers.
I can't live without her. She can't live without me. Sometimes I love her, but I don't like it, and vice versa to me. Sometimes she says, I don't like you today, but I love you.
Yeah, which is perfectly achievable. That's perfectly, I think a lot of marriages
That's unreasonable.
There's always love. Always. That's what holds us together. But yeah, I mean, some days
I don't think, since we've been together for nearly 40 years now, I don't think one day has gone by without me telling her I love her. I don't think, I'd never. I've spoken to her every day, no matter where I am. Sometimes I didn't want to speak because I was going to get an earful on the phone for being a bad boy. You blew the show again!
What's been your greatest
It was also a fight against time itself. Ozzy's children, Jack and Kelly, also shared their grief and helplessness during that period. Jack explained that watching his father's health decline was incredibly painful. There was nothing we could do except sit by his side. Jack said, "We lost the dad we once knew. Instead, we saw a man who was frail and exhausted." Kelly, too, echoed the same feelings. She admitted that, while it was heartbreaking, the family stayed united. They refused to abandon each other, even when the situation felt hopeless. The Osbourne family's strength came not from avoiding pain, but from enduring it together. Sharon revealed that Ozzy had undergone one final surgery, and at that, all he wanted was to return home. He just wanted peace and to be with his family. She explained. That interview became his last conversation with the public before his voice was silenced by illness. Though his later years were marked by constant medical battles, Ozzy's optimism remained visible. Even when his body showed signs of deep exhaustion, he tried to uplift those around him. Sharon, Jack, and Kelly could not hide their concern, but they stayed strong beside him, helping him through every difficult moment. This televised reunion was more than just a family gathering. It became a symbolic farewell, a moment where Ozzy seemed to say goodbye without directly using the words.
My career after 50 years would have ended that way. I mean, what did I want my legacy to be? I was fired because I was accused of being a racist. You and I could give that's not the way we run our lives.
When you got fired, you get turfed out by the cancel culture mob. Twitter is ablaze. They're joyful, they're gleeful, they've got rid of you, they've got you out of that job, they've had you fired for having an opinion. What was going through your mind when the first few days after that?
It was, listen, I don't scare easily, you know that, but some of the comments that were coming through on my social media were so horrific about cutting my throat, my husband's, even the dogs. They wanted to kill my dogs. And then they started on Ozzy, on his site, and then my kids. And I just thought, this is just insanity.
I had the same thing.
I went back to CBS and I said, not only can I not earn a living, but now I have to have 24-hour security because of you. And they go like, so what?
So your lives were being put under threat by these
Yes.
menacing people on social media, and you don't know who's real and who's not. Also, your career just basically ended. I mean, no one would touch you. You were toxic. You were driven out in a race storm. Therefore, you were untouchable.
Fans watching understood that this was likely the last time they would see him in such a setting. The Osbourne family's loyalty stood out. Together, they gave Ozzy the peace of knowing that, until his very last breath, he was never alone. While Ozzy fought his illness, Sharon faced her own struggles. She became a symbol of strength and sacrifice, but very few people knew how much she endured in silence. Beyond caring for her husband, she also had to deal with pressures from the media, harsh criticism, and personal setbacks. One of her most difficult moments came in 2021, when she was fired from The Talk, a daytime show she had been part of for more than a decade. The controversy started when Sharon defended her friend, Piers Morgan, after he was heavily criticized for his views on Meghan Markle. Sharon didn't necessarily agree with everything Piers said, but she stood up for his right to express his opinion. That stance led to intense backlash. Sharon recalled, "You get fired for defending freedom of speech for simply saying someone has the right to their opinion. No one would ever think that a career of more than 50 years could end like that." The criticism was brutal. She was branded unfairly, attacked in the media, and rejected by many in the public eye. What hurt even more was the flood of threats directed not just at her, but also at Ozzy and their children. Sharon revealed that some people sent horrific messages saying they wanted to harm her family, even threatening to kill their pets. "I lost my job, I lost my reputation, and I felt like society turned its back on me," she admitted. "For 3 months straight, I couldn't stop crying. I thought I had lost everything, but despite the pain, Sharon found the strength to keep going. Thanks largely to the support of her family, Ozzy stood by her just as she stood by him. She also sought therapy, including ketamine treatments and counseling, to help heal her mental scars. Piers Morgan had long been connected to the Osbourne family. He had worked with them for years and witnessed both their highs and their struggles. In the final interview, Piers wasn't just a journalist, he was a trusted friend who had seen Ozzy's journey from a powerful stage performer to a man fighting his last battle. For Piers, it was a great honor to be the one speaking to Ozzy in his last public appearance. "This is something I'll never forget," Piers said. "Ozzy was a legend, and I know our final moments together meant something." During that conversation, Ozzy made a remark that touched everyone who heard it. "I don't complain, because if I can still move, I'm not dead." This simple yet profound statement reflected his life philosophy. No matter how weak his body became, Ozzy always chose to fight, to stand back up, and to live with whatever strength remained. His words became not just a comfort to himself, but also an encouragement for his family and millions of fans. At another point in the interview, Ozzy shared something even more emotional. "I'm done. I just want to go home." With those words, he seemed to acknowledge that his time was nearing its end. His home was where he wanted to spend his final days, surrounded by the people who loved him most. Ozzy's passing was a heartbreaking loss for his family and fans around the world. But the final weeks of his life also revealed a story of devotion, courage, and resilience. Sharon sacrificed her own life in the public eye to care for him. Jack and Kelly stood strong even when they felt helpless, and Ozzy himself continued to inspire by holding onto hope, humor, and honesty until the very end. The Osbourne family's journey shows that behind fame and fortune, there are still very real human struggles. Illness, criticism, and personal loss touch their lives just like it touches countless others. What set them apart, however, was the way they faced these storms together. Fans will always remember Ozzy as the Prince of Darkness, the rock legend, who defined an era, but his final words and actions revealed another side of him, a father, a husband, and a fighter who valued family above everything else. In the end, what mattered most was not the stage lights, the tour, or the fame, but the simple truth that he was loved and never abandoned. With his family beside him, Ozzy Osbourne left the world in peace, forever remembered, not just as a musician, but as a man who lived fully and fought bravely until the very last moment. What might appear to be a short and simple statement carried a much deeper meaning when placed in the context of his life and health. For Ozzy Osbourne, those words were more than just casual remarks. They were a quiet but unmistakable farewell. At that time, Ozzy was already worn down by years of illness, pain, and endless challenges. What he wanted most was not more treatment or the hope of a complete recovery, but rather something more peaceful and personal. He longed to go home, to rest, and to be surrounded by the love of his family. This moment revealed not only his fatigue, but also his acceptance. Ozzy knew that his fight could not last forever. He had always been a warrior on stage and in life, but even the strongest warriors eventually recognize when their battles are coming to an end. He didn't give up easily. He faced every obstacle head-on, but in his heart, he understood that his time was limited. Sharon Osbourne, his devoted wife, later explained that the last years of his life were not only about coping with sickness, but also about preparing for the inevitable. She often said, "Our family has changed, but we've stayed together every day for the last 5 years." Her words reflected both strength and sorrow. The Osbourne family's unity was clear, yet so was the pain of watching someone they loved gradually fade away. Their children, Jack and Kelly, also shared their feelings. Jack remembered how the spark in his father's eyes began to dim, even though his spirit remained unshaken. Despite no longer being able to move as freely as before, Ozzy was still the pillar of the family, the one everyone leaned on. Kelly spoke about sensing the changes in her father, but she never allowed herself to withdraw. Instead, she made sure to stand beside him through the hardest times, showing him the same loyalty and love that he had shown his family for decades. Ozzy's situation revealed a harsh truth. Even legends eventually meet the limits of the human body. Once known as a symbol of boundless energy and power, he now faced weakness and physical decline. Yet, what amazed those around him was that he never complained about his condition. He chose acceptance over bitterness, gratitude over anger. Sharon once admitted, "We never wanted him to suffer that way, but at least he never felt alone. We were always by his side." The story of Ozzy Osbourne is not just about disease or struggle. It is also about acceptance, perseverance, and the strength of family bonds. Although he was no longer the unstoppable performer he once had been, he remained a legend in the hearts of his fans. In his final days, Ozzy continued to teach powerful lessons about resilience, about cherishing every moment, and about the love that holds families together. To his fans, Ozzy was far more than just a rock star. He was a father, a grandfather, and a cultural icon who defined an era of music. When he passed away on July 22, 2025, the world did not simply lose a famous musician, it witnessed the close of a chapter in rock history. Yet, even in his absence, his legacy endures through his loved ones, through his music, and through the generations he inspired. Sharon was not only his life partner, but also his unwavering supporter. both during his career and during his most fragile years. She has openly said that despite the many changes in their lives, the foundation of their family remained love and unity. Her loyalty was unshakable not only to Ozzy himself, but also to the family they had built together. Sharon was the one who helped guide the Osbourne family through the emotional storms that came with Ozzy's Parkinson's diagnosis and his declining health. Though she bore the heartbreak of watching him weaken, she became a source of courage for him and for their children. Jack Osbourne, their son, grew into a resilient man in his own right. He faced challenges such as multiple sclerosis, yet he overcame them, proving that the strength within the Osbourne family ran deep. Reflecting on his father's final years, Jack admitted, "We lost the dad we once knew, and in his place was a frail man. Even so, he made it clear that the love, memories, and lessons his father left behind would remain with the family forever." Kelly Osbourne, their daughter, also experienced her own struggles but found guidance in her parents. Examples: she once reflected on how her father transformed over time. He was a better grandfather than a father. And that's not criticism, it's redemption. Her words revealed a deep understanding and forgiveness. She recognized his flaws, but also celebrated the growth and love he eventually offered. When Ozzy finally passed away, the grief was felt worldwide. His music had shaped entire generations, and his presence had been larger than life. But his departure was not the end of his influence. Through Sharon, Jack, Kelly, and his grandchildren, his legacy continues. His songs remain, of course, but beyond that, his values, resilience, family loyalty, and honesty live on in those who loved him. One of his last public moments was an interview with Piers Morgan. It was more than a discussion about his music. It became a heartfelt reflection on his life, struggles, and values. Piers later said, "I was honored to be the last person to interview Ozzy on television. During that conversation, fans saw not just the rock star, but the man behind the fame, a husband, father, and grandfather confronting life and death with honesty." Ozzy's legacy is not only measured by iconic songs like Crazy Train, Iron Man, or Paranoid. His real legacy lies in the story of a man who lived passionately, who never stopped fighting for his family, and who proved that love and perseverance can outlast even the harshest circumstances. His family continues to protect and celebrate that legacy. Sharon, Jack, and Kelly carry his name forward, ensuring that his influence never fades. Though one chapter of his life closed, Ozzy's story is far from over. His life continues through his music, his family, and the countless fans who still feel inspired by him. His death marked the end of an era, but it also transformed him from a living legend into an eternal part of history. His life will never be forgotten, and his contributions will never be erased. The Osbourne family, despite the challenges and criticisms they have faced, always rose together. They stood as proof that love and unity can survive even the harshest trials. Ozzy may no longer walk among us, but his spirit, his lessons, and his music live forever. And as future generations listen to his songs and hear the stories of his resilience, they too will come to know the man who changed the world of rock. Ozzy Osbourne was more than a rock star. He was a husband, a father, a grandfather, and above all, a legend whose light will never truly fade. His life reminds us all that even in pain and struggle, love remains the strongest legacy of all.